Do not cling to anything as I or mine. This is the practice we've been studying, discussing, and putting into motion. Today I'd like to work from a sutta where the Buddha and Sariputta instruct Rahula. Rahula was Buddha's son. And I've always said that it makes good sense for us to pay attention to the teachings of the Buddha, but it makes even more sense to pay attention to the teachings that he gave his son, because they are jewels. They would have to be jewels. Now this is going to require that you open a possibility, that you open a potential. We have the expression in the world that says, close your eyes. But we never close our eyes. We move the eyelids, we drop the eyelids down, but the eyes are still open, which means the eyes can still see. However, we have this notion, we have this illusion that if I drop my eyelids down, I can't see out of my eyes anymore. Right? So, think about that for a moment. The greater discourse of advice to Rahula. And as the Buddha and other monastics were gathering to go through the village for alms rounds, the Buddha turned back to Rahula because he had wrapped his mind around his son's mind and determined that his son was in a place of conceitfulness, that Rahula was looking at his father and speaking on how handsome he was and how perfect he was, and how as his son he was just like him. Right? And the Buddha turned to Rahula and said, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material form should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Then he began to teach him a meditation after alms rounds, later on in that evening, that has to do with seeing the internal element and the external element as just the element. That there's no difference between internal earth element and external earth element, that there's no difference between internal water element and external water element, or fire element or water element. There's no difference. And so just as we don't say to ourselves as we are watching the river or we're watching a tree that this is me, we should not say that blood is me, or bone is me, or flesh or muscle is me. So, when you drop your eyelids, because we've been generating sight out of the two sockets, the two holes that we call the eyes. So this would be approximately where consciousness resides. Not sense consciousness, but consciousness. And I want you to in picture or out picture, whichever works for you, closing your eyelids, but understanding you are still with the ability to see. But now you find yourself inside your skull. Now, everybody has an idea of what they would see being inside their skull. You would see the inside of the skull, you would see apertures where the ears were, where the eyes were, where the lips and mouth were, because they're no longer there because they're external. Now you're internal. And so this is how we're going to look at the whole system that we call form or body. And as I read the different parts, the different body parts, I want you to do your best to illuminate the inside and see what corresponds to that list within yourself internally. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that? Everyone understands that? Yeah? Okay, great. So, it starts out by talking about the earth element. And it says, whatever internally, well, first of all, now everybody's preset, right? Everybody has been preformed. And so we're going to drop the eyelids down, and now we find ourselves on the inside of the skull. And it says, whatever internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified, and clung to, that is head hairs, body hairs, nails, skin, teeth, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, contents of the stomach, feces, and whatever else internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified, and clung to. This is called the internal earth element. So let's just stay with the internal earth element. The organs and the parts that comprise the internal earth element. And just look at these parts contained within form, within what we call the body. Now, both the internal earth element and the external earth element are simply earth element. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. And when one sees it thus, as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the earth element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the earth element. What Rahula is the water element? The water element may be either internal or external. What is the internal water element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is water, watery, and clung to, that is bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, synovial fluids, urine, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is watery, or water, or clung to. This is called the internal water element. Now, both the internal water element and the external water element are simply water. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. So let's look at the substances of the body that we consider to be water. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the water element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the water element. I really appreciate them using the word disenchanted because it brings up the image of storybook, fairy tale, an illusion. And what Rahula is the fire element? The fire element may be either internal or external. And what is the internal fire element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery, and clung to. That is, that by which one is warmed, ages, and is consumed. That by which what is eaten, drunk, consumed, and tasted gets completely digested. Or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery, and clung to. That is called the internal earth element. So let's look at the fire element in the body. And what, Rahula, is the air element? The air element may be either internal or external. What is the internal air element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is air, airy, and clung to. That is, upgoing winds, downgoing winds, winds to the limbs, in-breath and out-breath, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is air, airy, and clung to. This is called the internal air element. Now both the internal air element and the external air element is simply air element, and should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. So let's go in and look at the air element. Okay. Now, does anyone feel that any part of the human form was neglected, that we left out something? Or do most of you feel that we looked at everything that we consider to be a part of the human body? Okay. Let me see hands. Everyone? No? What part?
Space.
Oh, I didn't forget space. I just didn't include space. Space and consciousness is included in the Chan Nikaya. And in this particular sutta that I read from, space is also included. But unless you've meditated on the space kasina, it's hard to see space. But the other four elements you can see with your eyes open. Like you did, like you had your eyes open. You didn't have your mind closed to the possibility that your eyes are still open and you can see. So that's why. But yeah, thank you. That meant you were listening and you've been studying. All right, not quite the same though. Air has a quality of pushing. Space is just space. Space is just there. Like the opening to the mouth and the ears and the nose and other openings of the body. Yeah. So, that was innovative, but not quite accurate. Yes, John?
I was just interested what feet mean to me.
What? Feet?
Feet.
Okay, so what are feet? Feet are bone, tendons, sinews, blood. So it's a composition of water and earth.
Mm-hmm.
You have nails, yeah. So you have earth and water as an element. All right, yes.
Is this space when you're looking at everything as atoms and whatever element, then they're just space. Is that space we're talking about, or?
No, we're talking about the space around things at this point. We haven't gotten down to the atomic level or the elemental level,
All right.
which is a whole different meditation.
Okay.
Okay. But right now, what we are doing is shaking that tree of belief that says, I am this body. Right? So I'm suggesting that in all of the investigation that you went through, looking at every part of the body, like they give a lot of similes about the person, the cow herder who butchers a cow and cuts it apart, cuts it to pieces, and puts the parts up on the side of the road to be sold. And in that compilation, in that stack of body parts or cow parts, there's no cow. There's ribs and roasts and, brains and this and that and the other, but there's no cow. And so what we did was we dismantled the concept of self. And we saw that in all of these parts that we pulled loose and looked underneath and in between, we couldn't find what we thought was there or what some thought was there. And so it's another way of shaking, loosening the hold that we have, that the body and form has on us, that convinces us that this is a separate entity, an ego, that is separate and independent from all other egos and body parts. Now, the reality is that ultimately in our investigation, what we have is subject and object. And the fact is that the subject can never see itself. So we looked at the body and we couldn't find ourselves because it's impossible for the subject to see the subject. But that's the point of the investigation. You looked at what you thought was me, or I would say it another way, you looked at what you thought was you, or at one time you had the illusionary understanding that this body, this form, is you. But you looked at it, and you looked at every part of it, every piece of it, all of its substance, all of its non-substance, and you couldn't find you. Yes.
I was going to when I was taking gross anatomy and saw an autopsy, and I opened up the body, or we opened up the body, and then I saw someone perform an autopsy, and he would open up the body, take out an organ, put it on a scale, and write down how much it weighed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pathologist was a little more highly trained, would cut up, he was cutting up the kidneys, and there were rocks, actually, I could see that were being pulled out from the organ. So getting a sense that in some ways I participated in investigating the body and trying to hold on to it enough and let go of some stuff that would be more elemental, because my personal experience saw the inside of the body, the organs being taken out of the body, and I didn't see over time their disappearance of what I perceived. So when I'm doing meditation, I have some imagery of these organs, where they might be in the body, where they, from a practical perspective, are located. And is there a sense at some point where to let go of all that?
All of that exists as Dharma,
Okay, right.
but does not exist as you. And this is the exercise that we're performing. We're performing an autopsy on self. That's what we're doing. And we want to see whether we can discover this self thing, this person thing. Why is it so important? It's because with the idea of the existence of ego and self, there is suffering. And as long as I as long as I continue to hold on to and believe in the fact that a self is self-evident and exists, I will suffer. So a part of the practice of going from an existence of dukkha, an existence of suffering, to an existence or to an experience of peace and contentment, I have to let go of my idea, my concept, that somehow this is me. Because as soon as I develop the wrong view that I am, then there is what belongs to I. And this is where all of the fights and confusion starts. This is the beginning of division between what appears to be this form and what appears to be that form. And the only way that we can reunite ourselves is to go through this type of investigation or this type of autopsy where we cut it up. We say, okay, now show me. Let me see if I can find it. And it's the same investigation that is worked with all of the other four aggregates of being. So if there were no form and there were no feelings and there was no perception and there was no thinking and there was no sense consciousness, we wouldn't have the need for this discussion, for this exercise, for this investigation. Because there would be no constituent there that I could be talked into believing was me. When we are born, we have no sense of identity. But from the moment we're born, there are people around us who say, you are. And you are special, and you are beautiful, and this is yours. And I am your dad, and I am your mom, and all of those labels that begin to define this person. And as I grow and believe in what I've been told by everyone around me, I start carrying that or wearing that. And I am better than you. And all of those errors that are committed in the name of me or self or ego. So in our healing process, in our recombinating process, our coming together content, it is important that we see things differently. Because if you can't, you're always going to be vulnerable for hurt and pain. There's someone that's always going to disrespect you, cross the line, insult you, not give you your what you feel is your just desserts. There's someone that's always going to take what you think is yours because they don't agree that it's yours. They think it's mine. So there's that tug, that war that's going on. This is my country, this is my oil. This is your country, but that oil is mine. You're going to have all of those things going on until you begin to see how it really is. So this is the exercise. The exercise is not to necessarily tear something apart just because we can, but it's to see the error, the wrong view that we have, and then to correct it if we want to. Is there anyone here who has clinging involving the 5 aggregates? Okay. Well, this is the investigation that you can take if you want to free yourself from that illusion. So, which aggregate do you still cling to as being you?
More immediately, air. Because it's coming in, and I'm experiencing that. Or, I'm experiencing that.
Okay. Well, now, first of all, let's identify these things that we're talking about. So, first of all, I said aggregates. So, aggregates are form, feeling, perception or memory, thinking or thought, and consciousness, self-consciousness, or gate or sense consciousness. These are the 5 aggregates. And these are the reasons why we feel that we are an independent, existing, solid presence. The form tells me where I am. Form. In other words, we know that we're here because our body is here. That's where we are. Form tells me where I am. So it concretizes this concept of I, because I believe that I'm here because my body's here. Feeling tells me how I am. I feel good today. I don't feel so good today. Yeah. Perception tells me why I am. Because this was happening and this was done, and I've come from this cult, I come from this tribe, I come from this family. I went to this college, I joined this fraternity. So, although there's no direct identification, there is association that makes me believe that I am an individual. And this is what you're saying. So you're saying that air makes you think that you are an individual that is separate from all of these other individuals.
Well, I would say that, basically the feeling one probably would be most closest to the sensation of air coming in.
Okay. So feeling. So you say feeling is what helps me identify with personhood. Am I misinterpreting, or is that what you're saying? No, I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm trying
just
to
looking into it. Yeah, when I'm looking into that motion, I can definitely sense that, like, there's something there.
Okay, and that something is an I. That's separate from everything else. This is what we're this is what we're talking about. We are trying to determine whether there's a self. Because one of the things that has already been determined is that a belief in self is the number one obstacle to nibbana or freedom or enlightenment. It's the number one reason why we stay tied to the karmic rotation of birth and death. Number one. Even before greed, even before doubt, even before hatred, the belief in self is the number one hindrance to liberation from all suffering. Remember, when we talk about enlightenment and we talk about dukkha or suffering, that enlightenment is the freedom from suffering, is a place of contentment, a place of peace. That's what that is. And so we say to get there, you have to let go of, you have to turn your back on, you have to abandon this whole idea that you are somebody, independent of other bodies. Okay? That's the only way you're going to free yourself or liberate yourself to where you will have peace. And that's the only purpose of this philosophy, is to help you realize who you really are, so that you will stop creating and manifesting for yourself all of the conflict and confrontation that you experienced in life. So, are you conflict free?
No.
Okay. Do you want to be?
Yes.
All right. Well, this is what you got to do.
Thank you.
You got to abandon the idea of personal existence. Okay. Now, that does not mean annihilation. That just means you give up the conceit of ego. See the difference? Okay.
I'm looking. I can't see that. I mean, I think I intellectually can follow that and have understood that technically, but the experience of it is a little more fleeting.
Okay. Well, my suggestion or recommendation is just stay awake to all of your episodes of discomfort, pain, and suffering. Not physical pain, but mental pain. Disagreements with yourself and others. Disagreements with your moment in existence. And as you are aware of that, being in that moment with that struggle, where you agree with yourself that you are not content, you are not still, look for the ego. Look for the self. And you will always find it. Because the self and the manufacturer of self, the belief in self, is what causes us to be vulnerable to pain and suffering. So we can't get rid of pain. We can't become happy ever after when we still have the concept of I am going to be happy ever after. As long as there's an I, there's not going to be happiness. There's always going to be something that the I is going to complain about. There's always going to be something that the I wants that the I doesn't have. And the I doesn't care whether it belongs to someone else or not. The I wants it, the I takes it. Or dies trying. So it's up to you. But I'm just saying that there are many spiritual paths or spiritual walks, and they all have their acknowledged benefits. This one is to eliminate suffering in your life. Not to get you to heaven, not to get you to Atman, but just to release and relieve you from the pain and hurt and suffering that you might have experienced from the time you were born, this time, until right now. And if that's what you want, then you've got to listen to and let go of some things. If you're not ready to let go of those things yet, wait until you're ready before you start to study this philosophy. Because that's all this is. So the first thing we all have to do is make a decision about what we want in life. What do we want in life? What do we think we deserve in life? What is our goal in life? Do you have a goal yet?
Understand myself and others.
Okay. There are no others. As long as we look at a diversified reality, as long as I see me and see you, there is no possibility of unity. But that's the illness, the separation, the disconnect, the unwholesomeness. No whole, no togetherness, no belief in community. As long as there's a me and a you, there's going to flare up disagreement, because we're never going to see things exactly the same, because I'm different from you.
I guess I could say myself and others, or maybe not self. It's one of those things where, like, I guess, the goal for everybody, I would think, is to be happy and free from suffering.
Okay.
But the way to do that, I think, is to follow the prescription you've been explaining.
By who?
Well, to dissolve this illusion.
Okay. So what the Buddha taught was that one of the illusions to dissolve is the belief that you are an independent existing self.
Chiefly, I would agree. That's the number one delusion, correct?
Okay. That's the only delusion. When you get rid of that, the rest of them disappear.
And that's why we're here?
You mean this is why we're existing?
Well,
When you say this is why we're here, you mean in this life? This is why we're breathing in this life? Because we didn't get it the last time?
right.
Okay.
We're here to dissolve, to dissolve. We're coming through this. I mean, it's a work. It's not, not everybody comes in. Maybe, like you said before, we are enlightened, but then we take on these prescribed delusions that sort of a mass sort of illusion that people, I don't know, voiced on us as our lives continue, and then we slowly unravel it, grow through it, and out of it, maybe we probably learn something along the way. So even delusion might be useful to some degree. Don't know.
Yeah.
But that's
yeah.
what life is like. It can't be totally useless, the delusion.
it's not that it's useless. In other words, every time we are sick, whether it's physical or psychological, we learn what wellness, or we appreciate what wellness is all about. And we strive to get back to that place. So, sickness, disease, dis-ease, discomfort, it teaches us that we're not in the place that we should be. It's like the fire underneath of us that makes us move. When we're in a relationship that's just abusive, painful, and there's no love there we feel, eventually, no matter how hard it is, no matter how difficult it is, we get out of it. Because it just becomes so unbearable for us, so unloving for us. Well, this is what suffering does. Suffering makes you aware that you're not in a good place. And it makes you so uncomfortable that eventually you decide to move. You decide to do something about it. Sometimes we get the time to heal and become healthy, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we wait too late. And so we have to come around again. It's like the dog being tethered to a pole, and it just keeps running around. Wants to be free, but it just goes around in a circle. Can't be. So for most of us, there comes a time of expediency when we realize we don't have much time left. And so as opposed to indulging in our illusions, we try to find a way out. Most of us have been in a place where we felt we still had time. Well, I'll go to church next Sunday, or I'll be kind to people next Sunday, but right now I've got things to do. I've got more important things to do, which is to look out for myself. And what we learn is that time is not guaranteed. That everybody doesn't die when they're 92. That children die, and teenagers die, and young adults die, and middle-aged people die. And so we can't depend on chronology to give us comfort in our work of liberation. That if you truly have the wisdom or the seeing that understands that you're suffering and that you're carrying the seeds of suffering, the defilements, whether it be hatred or greed or sloth and torpor or doubt or restlessness and remorse, that you're still contained by the fetters that keep you in samsara, then you are fortunate to meet people who encourage you to work at being who you truly are. That being a human being is not enough. it's the place where you can work at redemption, work at being the prodigal son and getting back home to your wholeness, to your wellness, your sameness. Because the sameness allows me to see not you and me, but me and me. And when I see me and me, then I treat me like I want me to be treated. Which means I don't get mad and I don't get angry and I don't take and I don't inflict. But I love. And I'm patient and I'm kind. And I live every day with that intention. Because I see me in me. So, I wish you well. Thank you all, as always, for coming and practicing. May all beings be liberated from suffering. May we be well. May we be happy. May we be peaceful.